Fly me to the moon and let me play among the stars. Tell me what spring is like on Jupiter and Mars. Hello everyone, my name's Stonsey Boy and welcome back to Reading with Stonsey. Today we are going to be reading Willodeen, Chapter 6 to Chapter 9, pages 21 to 45. If it rhymes, it means it's true. Though, that saying doesn't really make much sense when you kind of look into the context of, if it rhymes, it must be true. Doesn't that mean you're gonna fry and I'm gonna cry? Does that mean I'm gonna cry? I don't know. Does that mean you're gonna fry? I don't know. So, without figuring out what we should and shouldn't know, let's begin. Chapter 6. The annual arrival of the hummingbears was our village claim to fame. They migrated down from the north in huge flocks, confusing the skies and crowding the clouds before landing on the blue willows in our valley. They stayed until spring when they flew back to another home, an island hundreds of miles to the north. It was breathtaking seeing those animals clustered to the trees, their shimmering wings all fluttering, and they'd chosen perchance no one was sure. It seemed to have something to do with the gentle winter climate of our stands of blue willows, the only trees where they nest. Perchance they tucked in the valley around by the wooded hills like a baby in the green cradle. The river Essex ran through the town. Honey slow, our blue willows loved the river. They craved water, clutching the bank with their knotty-fingered roots, and the hummingbears loved the willows. It was nothing of their sweet faces and lovely cooing that made the hummingbirds so irresistible as their nest made of glistening bubbles that absorbed sunlight and glowed all night. As if hundreds of miniature rainbows had gathered for a party, no one knew how the hummingbears worked in their nesting wizardry. They chewed willowy leaves, somehow extracting the sap, and then blew tough-walled bubbles. The bubbles adhered to each other in the branches of the willows. In surprising strength, most years the village had autumn fair to celebrate the arrival of the hummingbears, and visitors came from near and far. When I was 7, we had to call it off after a mudslide north of the village center, and when I was 9, smoke from the fire 2 ridges over it had kept most of the visitors away. But even without those problems, we'd all noticed the fewer hummingbears were migrating to the village. Each autumn, the willows still turned silvery blue, the air still got crisp apple feel to it, and we was still prepared for the onslaught of visitors. But something had changed. It had to be worrisome, to say the least. Perchance depended on money from some tourists. Inns brimmed to overflowing with customers who brought food, ale, and trinkets. A boy named Connor Burke made hummingbears out of willow and bark, and sold them as souvenirs. May sold her thick knitted shawls. Nidwit Poole, the baker, created hummingbear-shaped pastries filled with berry jam. The rest of the year we made ends meet. We tended to our garden plots. Some of us worked in the lumber mill. We fished in the river and hunted in the forest. A handful of men had jobs building tracks on the steam railway that skirted the village. But the hummingbears and the autumn fair, that's what had always kept us afloat through the lean months. Mostly I avoided the fair. Its teeming crowds had made me feel as if I was being smothered. So much noise, so much forced merrymaking. Often I would see children there, ones that recognized my rare visit to school. They moved in packs like wild dogs. After they passed, I would hear them howling with laughter. I wonder sometimes if it would be like to have a friend. To be comfortable with myself, I would be comfortable with someone else too. But I was happy enough. I didn't see the complications and confusion that might come with friendship. Usually I could stand only a few minutes of the fair before retreating to someplace quiet and safe. I loved seeing the hummingbears, of course, but it was the screechers that mattered most to me and worried me more. While we were seeing fewer and fewer hummingbears each fall, by the time I was nearly 11, the screechers had all but disappeared. I seemed to be the only one of few people who noticed, and I was quite sure I was the only one who cared. Chapter 7. While I was recovering from the fire, May and Bertie gave me a notebook, along with a sharp quill pen, a bottle of mirror petal ink, and several pencils. Each year after that, they gave me a fresh supply. Once I was better, I always kept a notebook and pencil with me as a waist pouch. On my walks, I took notes. Before the fire, I'd just point out interesting things to Pa as I noticed them. But all by myself, I felt the need to keep a permanent record of what I've observed. I guess I'd come to understand that the world could change in a heartbeat. I drew the till owls, asking for one only question: who? I kept track of where badger droppings and fresh fox dens. I sketched the buds peeking from the berry bushes. I counted the few blue willows in the hills. The more I watched and listened and stayed quiet and still, the more I understood the way of things. But mostly I learned about screechers. I discovered that they're lazy nest builders they were, taking over the abandoned homes to others whenever they could. I watched them eating dandy grass and green grubs. I had learned they had almost never made their strange screechy noise when the sun was out. And I counted. I've always had a gift for it, and like knowing how many things at first, it was hard to keep track, but eventually I began to know the screechers as individuals. I learned how to tell males from females. The males had wider snouts and broader chests. I recognized kin, who I had my favorite screechers, and I gave them names. Kerwin had a mere stump of a tail. Budwig was missing a right paw. Aunt Lee was petite, with a stripe of white down her right side, but not her left. I got to know the families too, and their frolicking babes and grumpy grandparents, especially since some returned after a year. Screechers seemed to work hard at keeping their broods together. Older brothers and sisters often stood a lookout near dens, and parents never let their babies wander far. They had reason to be cautious. The village councilors had enacted a bounty on screechers after one ventured into a garbage pile during the autumn fair. A tourist happened upon them. The stench was bad for business, and that was that. Screechers were a nuisance, but nothing well-aimed arrow couldn't fix. 5 pieces of copper for a screecher pelt. That infuriated me. So who could blame a curious animal for nosing around town with the hope of his stomach? Season after season, year after year, I kept counting, and I started. There are 87 screechers, I'm pretty sure anyway. With that many, I was hard to keep them all straight. The next year, I counted 39 of them. By the autumn, I was about to turn 11. I feared we might be down to 1. Just one day after I looked, and day after day, I failed to find any more. Where is he? I murmured to Duzu one afternoon. He was perched on my shoulder while I peered into the empty nest. It had been occupied by a family of 4 screechers the year before. Duzu had made a cooing noise. He always responded when I spoke, and the 3 distinct conversational noises. Sometimes I was a throaty purr, sometimes it was a rising sound like a question, sometimes it was soft, musical sigh. It was quite sure we were having a conversation. We just had no idea what we were saying to each other. It was getting late, the sun was low, tired and flushed after a long day. The path was foreshadowed, and here and there, sunbeams cut through the limbs like golden swords. Near the top of the ridge, I knelt, searching for the tracks in the dirt, and the crack and hard. There had been no rain for ages, it seemed, and I doubt I'd see anything much, but the screechers had sharp curved claws on each front foot, and sometimes those left marks. Nothing, though, I knew he'd been here yesterday. The only screecher I'd seen in 2 months. He was big and old, with a gray snout. I called him Sir Zert. He was old, so old, I figured he deserved a knighthood, simply for surviving. I sniffed the air. Was that smoke I smelled? Part of me had always been alert, waiting for the next fire, the next loss, especially at the time of year, when every day brought hot, dry winds. I inhaled again, no smoke, but maybe, just maybe, I smelled screecher. But when they were frightened, screechers still had an odor about them. A good smell, at least I thought so. Wild and earthy. Moved deeper into trees and caught a glimpse of something. There he was, curled up in a pile of debris branches, his snout covered by paw. A younger screecher would have noticed me approaching, but he probably couldn't hear or smell like he used to. He limped when he walked, like a May and Birdie. I suppose screechers got a rheumatism for some as people. I took a step closer. Sir Zoot opened one eye and glared. He grumbled to let me know I disturbed his nap. I lowered my head and looked away. After all my hours of watching, I learned that that's how you show I wasn't a threat. He relaxed a bit, half closing his eyes. I loved his eyebrow whiskers, bushy and silver white, and his lashes long and thick. Behind me, a branch snapped. I heard footsteps moving. Thwap! The arrow hit with such force that the nest seemed to explode. Chapter 8. My heart lurched. No, I screamed, but my voice got lost in the cities of Sir Zert and the lumbering steps of the approaching hunters. Run, I yelled, as if the old screecher could understand me. I slipped Zuzu into my coat pocket. Hush, I said. Sir Zoot was gone, but I saw a thin trail of blood leading into the trees. Quickly, I covered it with leaves, so no need for hunters to realize they had hit their mark. Another arrow sped past, landing in the abandoned nest. Third arrow struck tree trunk near my head. I crouched low. Stop, I cried. He's gone, just stop. Through the branches, I make out 2 men carry bows with quivers of arrows stabbed to their backs. One man was short, dark-haired and stocky. The other was tall, with a thick gray beard and large belly. Foolish child, Greybeard grumbled. You just cost me a pocketful of coppers. Lucky we didn't hit you, said the companion. I picked up the arrow near my feet. His tip was sharp and his screecher tail's quill. The Fletcher reminded me of raven feathers. Give that you, the graybeard said. His partner yanked the arrow lodged in the tree trunk, but the shaft broke. Please, they don't deserve to be killed, I said. The graybeard plunged his nose. Smell that? He asked. Ain't nothing worse than that stink. I was so angry I could have noticed it. They do that when they're afraid, I said. They don't have arrows like you. Got sharp enough Tuscan bobs on them tails, said the shorter man. No need to stink up the well, too. Graybeard held out his hand. Let's have it, then, he said, jerking his chin at the arrow I was still clutching. My hands were trembling. I felt the tip, imagining the pain it would inflict. I had handled many arrows, of course. My parents had taught me to hunt. I ate rabbit stew and chicken when I could, same as everyone else. But to kill something for no reason, just because, there was the sense in that. Hand it over, girl. I didn't look at him. I avoided meeting people's eyes. I just made my insides jittery. Besides, I learned I didn't always like what I saw there. Now, he snapped. But by then I was already running down the hill, traded by screams of rage. Chapter 9. Nearly to the bottom of the hill, just out of sight of the village center, I glanced behind me. The hunter seemed to have given up. My heart shouted at me to slow down. My eyes stung. I smelled awful. And yet, it reminded me of the time I'd seen a screecher family while berry hunting with my father, that day before everything had gone so wrong. With a grunt, I tossed the arrow as far as I could into a patch of thick bushes. Find that. Ow, said the bush. I stopped cold. A boy emerged. When he had an armful of reeds and grasses, one hand and the lantern in the other, I recognized him as Connor, the boy who sold hummingbird souvenirs in the tourist each autumn. He was a bit taller than me, with warm brown skin and a smile too large for his face. He squinted and then rubbed his nose. You've been with your friends? My friends? I frowned, because I didn't have any. Truth was, I never really had any. The Screechers? You followed me? Oh, of course not. It's just, I've heard talk that you study them, and I go up that way sometimes to get my materials from my puzzlers. Puzzlers? Connor shrugged. Things I make. I call them that because I'm never sure how I'm going to put all the pieces together. He cocked his head. Whose arrow was that? I looked at my feet. I did that a lot. I knew every least crest in my tired old shoes by heart. I think they killed him. An old screecher. My voice was low. 2 hunters. For no reason. For most people, money is always the reason. I think he might have been at last. I haven't seen any other screechers in ages. I made myself look at Connor. Have you? He shook his head. There was nothing more to say. I took a few steps toward the village and stopped. I needed to go back, to know for sure. I spun on my heel and started a slow trudge back up the hill. You're going back? Connor asked. I just want to know for sure. What if he's still alive and suffering? I'll go with you. I've got a lantern, and it'll be dark soon. I know these woods better than anyone. It was true. I knew the path by heart, knew all the perchance cobblestone by cobblestone and weed by weed. Connor set his grasses down on the side of the path. You've better luck tomorrow, then, when it's light. Tomorrow, I realized with a start, I'd be turning 11 tomorrow. I'd completely forgotten. Tomorrow is my birthday, I blurted. My cheeks burned. Why had I said that out loud? I began walking faster, but Connor rushed to join me. Here, you could borrow my lantern. Happy birthday. I looked up the ridge. The forest had changed into a collection of trees in the dark, formless mass. He was right about needing light. May and Birdie had been right, too. They'd urged me to take the lantern, but I'd refused. Stubborn as the day is long, the Birdie, who had been a bit as stubborn as I was. Sometimes it's better to bend than break, said May. She'd been more inclined toward the gender persuasion, but not it worked on me. I didn't want Connor's lantern, just mean having to return it to him later, and I certainly didn't want his company. But I did want light. Right on cue, Duzu poked his head out of my pocket and cooed. Hello there, said Connor. He held out his hand, and to my annoyance, Duzu chambered out of my pocket, up Connor's arm, and onto his shoulder. I love hummingbears, Connor said. They're amazing. This is one of the was hurt in the fire? I nodded, surprised he'd heard about Duzu, but in perchance people seem to know everything about everybody. Duzu cooed again. Fine, I said to Connor. You come. What about your grasses? You can come, but what about your grasses and reeds? They're not going anywhere. I walked as quickly as I could, eyes peeled for any sign of hunters, with Connor and Duzu at my side. The moon was caught behind the clouds, and the forest wore in the night in the dark, thick cloak. I had to admit, I was glad of the yellow glow of Connor's lantern. Near the top of the ridge, I paused into the angled trees. It wasn't hard to find them. I knew he was dead before I even got there. His eyes stared at nothing. His white snout was covered in blood. Duzu made his questioning noise, and Connor reached up to stroke him behind the ears. I gathered leaves and pine needles, covering the body as best I could, and wasn't for proper burial, but the dirt was too hard for much else. I knew the old screecher would have died soon anyway. I also knew that before long other animals, sir bears maybe, or wolves, would find his body and use what they could out of it. That was nature's way. He didn't talk, and as we headed back down, but in my head, a sad refrain repeated in each foottail. He was the last. The last. the last. And so is the end. Turn your head and count to 10. That's really sad. I can't understand the genre of this book. Because I feel for a second it's a kid's book, but in the other second I feel as if it is a not kid's book. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter what I mean, because today we read pages 21 to 45. Echikatung. And next time we will be reading pages 46 to 58, if I'm pretty sure that's what it said. Yep, 46 of 58. And chapters 10 and... I know you guys are probably guessing a high number, but actually it's just chapter 10 to nothing. Wait, chapter 10 to nothing. Chapter 10 to chapter 1. Okay, yeah, chapter 10 to chapter 11. It's going to be a pretty short episode next episode, but you know how it is. So, yeah, I know what you're waiting for. You think I'm going to end the video because I haven't recorded in a long time, but I know that it's time for... the reading corner of the day. Doing it up, Stonsey's way. Bop. Today we are going to learn about the dog breed, the Vizsla. I don't know if it's Russian. I don't know if it's American. We will know by its history, but look at it. There's many of it with different colored collars. Different colored collars is the little dog. Different colored collars is the Vizsla. Very fun little rhyme. But it looks silly. It's a very silly dog. But of course, I can't make fun of it until I know the history. As you should know by now, before you dare make any assumptions on anything, you should know the history beforehand, just so you have an upper hand in any arguments, conversations, or maybe if you want to know the truth, you could be tricked. So, the history of the Vizsla is that the Vizsla's forebears have included breeds that mayors collected as they swarmed across Europe before settling in Hungary over 1,000 years ago. Writings on falconry from the Middle Ages describe dogs of Vizsla type. The Hungarian plains were rich in game, and hunters wanted a fast but close-working dog that could not only point and retrieve birds but trail mammals over thick ground cover. The breed was unquestionably established in the 18th century, having found special favor by barons and warlords over the time. By the end of the 19th century, however, the breed had greatly declined in numbers. It received through the discovery of careful breeding about a dozen good specimens. World War II spread the Vizsla throughout the world. Hungarians fleeing Russian occupation took their pointing dogs to various other countries, including America, where their handsome appearance and exceptional hunting abilities were soon appreciated. The American Kennel Company, or AKC, recognition came in 1960. Once again, the Vizsla quickly gained admirers, and the breed is now regularly seen as a field, show ring, and home. It's also sometimes called the Hungarian Vizsla or Hungarian Pointer. How cool! A German dog! He doesn't look like a German dog, but I guess he is. So now that we know the history, you want this dog. Your kid is grabbing at your pants or your shirt and being like, "Parent, can I have this animal?" But you must know the temperament. What if it's violent? What if it's aggressive? Well, the temperament of the Hungarian Pointer, the Hungarian Vizsla, or as we're just going to keep calling it, the Vizsla, is that it's bred to be the close working gun dog. The Vizsla has energy to range all day. It's true to hunter at heart, a talented pointer, and always on the lookout for a bird scent. It can become frustrating and destructive if not given adequate exercise, but most can be stubborn. Some can be timid, and others can be overly excitable. It is gentle, affectionate, and sensitive, and can be protective. The Vizsla makes a good companion for active owner who spends a lot of time outdoors. Maybe not the best for kids, but if you're an active man or woman, and you go hiking a lot, maybe this dog is for you. Now that you know what this temperament is, there's got to be some type of catch. I go outside, I go hiking, I go do all these things. So how do I keep this dog up and running like I do to my beautiful own body? Well, the upkeep of the Vizsla is that the Vizsla needs a lot of strenuous exercise every day. This is an active breed that cannot be expected to meet its energy requirements in a short walk within a small yard. It needs to be jogged or allowed to run in the large enclosed area. Otherwise, its needs are minimal, and its coat requires a little care, except for an occasional brushing to remove dead hair. It can live outside in the warm climates, given adequate shelter, but should sleep indoors on cold nights. It needs a soft bed. Most of all, it needs family interaction. Maybe it is good for family. And if you have any family near you, like any small children, please cover their ears. If you're a teenager or an adult, please grab your notebooks or just take notes in your mind. For we are going to talk about the health of the Vizsla, the saddest part in the videos. So the major concerns you need to look out for the Vizsla is epilepsy. Minor concerns are CHD, lymphosarcoma, and it's occasionally seen with PRA, dwarfism, tricuspid valve dysplasia, persistent right arcadic arch, and hyperthyroidism. Now, you might be wondering, what is dwarfism and why would I care? It's just my dog, but smaller and cuter. Well, actually, it still has the same body and organ parts of a dog of its natural size. So, if you ever have a dog with dwarfism, you might want to get them checked out immediately. It may be cute for now, but their bodies will overexert and overcreate. Then, if their bodies try to, like the breed is, how they're very exercise worthy, if they exercise too much, they may have heart and lung problems because of it, especially with a big dog such as this. Their suggested tests are hip and thyroid, and their lifespan are 10 to 14 years. The second to final thing we're going to learn today is the form and function. I don't have kids. This dog's already pretty perfect for not having kids, but let's just read the form and function. I'm not used to this part. So, the form and function of the Vizsla is that the Vizsla is slightly built but muscular, giving it speed and endurance in the field. Its gait is light, graceful, smooth, and ground covering. Its short, smooth coat is dense, providing some protection from the elements, and the golden rust color is a hallmark of the breed. Now, finally, we're at the tier list, which is basically a summary of everything, but in a tier list, because tier lists are cool, okay? Goodness. So, for at a glance, we got 3 for the 3 is average, 5 is the best, 1 is the worst, and 2 and 4 are all right. Well, in their own respective, directions. Anywho, the energy level and exercise requirements are at a 3, so pretty average. Their playfulness is at a 4, that's very kind of playful. Affection level is at a 5, they're very loving. Friendliness towards dogs is at a 3. Friendliness towards other pets is a 4. Friendliness towards strangers is a 5. So that could be good, could be bad. Ease of training is pretty average. Watchdog ability is at a 4. Their protection ability and grooming requirements are at a 1, so there's some good and some really bad. And cold tolerance is at a 2, which I've never seen before. That's surprising. And heat tolerance is at a 3. Finally, the weight of both a male and female Vizsla for a healthy dog is 45 to 65 pounds, and the height for a male is 24 to 22 inches. I don't know why I read that backwards. And a female is 21 to 23. Well, ain't that nice? But yeah, next time we will be reading about the thing we're going to read in the next video. I don't know how I keep catching you guys like this. Catching you guys with your eyes down. Also, I want to make this clear. We actually only have the next dog and the dog after that before we're finally outside of the sporting group. And then we will be going into the hound group. So that is exciting. So, I hope you guys have a super fantastic, wonderful day. Be polite, be efficient, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And I'll see you guys next time.